former British Prime Minister Tony Blair has defended his relationship with Rupert Murdoch while appearing at London's phone hacking inquiry. Mr Blair, who's the godfather of one of Mr Murdoch's children, says it was a working relationship until he left office. And he insisted he'd not changed any policies to please the Murdoch papers.
Mr Blair says he made a strategic decision not to fight the Murdoch press while he was in office, and he admitted politicians really have no choice but to court media owners or risk savage press attacks.
With any of these big media groups, you fall out with them and you watch out, because it is literally relentless and unremitting once that happens. And my view is that that is what creates this situation in which these media people get a power in the system that is unhealthy and which I have felt throughout my time uncomfortable with. Now, as I say, I took the decision, and this I'm well aware could be subject to criticism. I took the strategic decision to manage this, not confront it. But the power of it is indisputable.
Tony Blair at the Leveson inquiry overnight. Joining us now from London is journalist Arion McNicoll. He worked for both the Times and the Sunday Times newspapers. He's now the editor for the non-profit Journalism Foundation. Arion, good morning to you. What struck you as the most striking part of that testimony when Tony Blair was speaking about that often fractious relationship between press and politicians?
Well, it was another extremely dramatic day at the Leveson inquiry as a protester burst in and threatened to repeat a bit of a rerun of the pie-in-the-face incident that Rupert Murdoch very nearly faced late last year when he appeared before the Select Committee. But really, when it came down to it, that was a minor interference in a day that was very much about the relationship that Murdoch had with Tony Blair's government, and Blair was very keen that he was going to make clear the distinction between his own government and the relationship that they had with Murdoch. He was claiming that Murdoch hadn't asked him for any favours, and in fact he hadn't granted him any, and he went on to list 6 different occasions where the new Labor government had in fact actually acted entirely contrary to the wishes of Murdoch media, including such things as the expansion of the BBC during his time in office, and also his own resistance to Rupert Murdoch's attempts to buy up Manchester United Football Club, and also his government's establishment of Ofcom. So he says that really his government was acting very much against Rupert Murdoch, and that was flying in the face of the accusations that people were trying to make that he had been too close with Murdoch. And we've heard at the top of this report that that people have been talking about the fact that Rupert Murdoch has actually made Tony Blair the godfather to his young daughter Grace. Now, Tony Blair was asked by Robert JQC about this, and he said that he would never have become godfather to Rupert Murdoch's child during the time that he was in office. And he said he only made that decision to do that after he stood down as Prime Minister in 2007. But before then, it was a perfectly working relationship, or so he claims. Now, of course, on the other hand, back in 1995, before Blair even became Prime Minister, he actually flew out to Hayman Island over there in Australia to attend a conference that News Corp were holding, at which he actively was attempting to pursue the favour of Murdoch's press back here in the UK. And he said that that was quite important to him. So regardless of how you look at it, it was very clear that Tony Blair was really courting the Murdoch's favour. And
he did actually make the concession of sorts that sometimes he got a bit too close to Rupert Murdoch without granting him, as he argues, any favours. And he also made the very obvious point that really this unhealthily close relationship between politicians and press is somewhat inevitable, given the way it's a very symbiotic relationship between the two.
He did say that, and he said that it was something that was on his mind, and one of his vague ideas was that he might like to see some sort of further regulation come to the press over here. But he said that really trying to tackle that was a low policy objective, and he understood that it was going to be a Pandora's box of sorts if he sought to undertake, well, really what we're seeing now, the kind of, great overhaul of that very intimate relationship that had come to exist between politicians, the press and the police, that's now being so questioned and put under scrutiny by the Leveson inquiry. So he knew that it was something that needed to be looked at.
And Arion, what do you make of that, as Mr Blair described it, strategic decision not to essentially fight fire with fire and take it up to those powerful media interests?
I think it's hard to know, and of course, it's perfectly obvious that in the years preceding this inquiry, and potentially years hence, depending on the outcomes of the inquiry and the recommendations that Leveson makes, it's perfectly clear that there is a relationship between politicians and media, and to an extent, whether you believe the Sun headline when they wrote it was the Sun what won it triumphantly after Blair came to power, certainly there is a great connection between the politicians on the one hand and the media who, it could be argued, stand the chance to potentially be kingmakers. And Blair said, in the inquiry today, he said the Sun is particularly powerful because unlike many of the other newspapers here, the Sun is actually a swinging voter. The Telegraph always comes down on the side of the Conservative Party, and the Times is fairly conservative in its leanings as well. But the Sun actually swings, and back when Tony Blair became Prime Minister, they backed him. After Gordon Brown, they switched allegiance back to the Conservatives. So it's clear there that evidently it was something that to him was important, and that's why he made the trek half a world away to Hayman Island.
Arion McNicoll, thank you. We'll have to leave it there.
Thank you.